may ask Heather to elaborate what was his experience in the domain of HR and training and training and development, if learning and development, sorry. How does the policy making plays an important role in this domain or to have an inclusiveness within the workplace?
So I mean, the conversation around policy is really elaborate one, but I'll try to contain it to the topic that we're discussing today, which is on intersectionality. We've surely come a long way when it comes to policies because organizations have become far more aware in terms of what kind of policies would benefit our employees. And while the intent is in place, I do believe that sometimes policymakers tend to look at one section of the identity or the society and would create a policy only to realize that it benefits one group, but on the way, it might be hampering some other groups as well, right? Or it might not be benefiting the other groups or could be discriminatory for the other groups. And that's where I think the conversation of intersectionality in policymaking is important. First and foremost, I think the policymakers need to evaluate themselves in order to what position of this society are they standing in while making this policy, what lens of the society and their own lived experience they are putting into play while creating those policies, what levers of power are they really acting upon while developing this policy, because then the policy could be shaped in the way that the policymakers are the ones who are creating it. And therefore, I think for any policy to be put into action, while it's easy to pen it down, when it really comes to deploying and adoption, that's where you really need to reach out to the groups which are going to be impacted by them and take their inputs in terms of whether this policy makes sense for them, do they even need this, are there more groups than one that could benefit from that policy. One of the examples which I'll just pick up from what Nishtha was sharing was when we were looking at hiring transgender people in our earlier organization, there was this big hue and cry that the group was coming forward and said, let's do gender neutral washrooms, right? Because that would benefit transgender people. Fair enough, it would. But while the conversations were on, we also realized that there are also male colleagues, cisgender men, who might want to bring their daughters at work. Which washroom would they go to? They would also need a gender-neutral washroom. So while you're creating a gender-neutral washroom, it's not just serving one section of the identity, but it could be benefiting far more groups that might be able to use that particular gender-neutral washroom. So when the narrative gets a little bit more elaborate, when the narrative serves a few more sections of the society, it becomes a lot more easier to implement a certain set of policy. On the other hand, my own lived experience with same-sex partner medical insurance policy. While many organizations would go out there and say, hey, we have same-sex partner benefits for insurance, you know, the portal has an filter to select a partner. But the criteria is that you need to be married in order to enter your partner's details. Now, for a same-sex partner in this country, today we don't have gay rights, marriage rights. How am I supposed to declare myself as married? So the organizations have gone all out and said, you know what, we have same-sex partner benefits, you can go and enroll your partner. And therefore, I was now being told that if I want to enter my partner's details, I need to select married as the status of my marriage, and then I should enter the name of my partner. Now, this is where the policy really falls flat, right? So while you might have an intent and you go all out and say, we want to be inclusive organization, we want to have policies out there, but how do these policies really get played out, whether it's really serving the right purpose, is a question that you need to ask. The most common one, which we all have heard, is the policies around sexual harassment or discrimination at workplace. Again, a lot of these policies and the training tools which are used for awareness would be looking at it from the lens of a particular gender. but then there are also harassment and discrimination that's happening to different other groups in the organization. Can you speak about caste when you're talking about discrimination? Can you talk about LGBTQ when you're talking about discrimination? Can you talk about domestic violence, whether for men or women, at workplace, at home, in your policy guidelines? So those are the ways I think we still need to look at our policies holistically. And one best ways is to reach out to your ERG groups, because they are the ones who represent those groups and would be able to kind of look at it from a fair lens. And of course, that's where your journey to awareness and education kind of begins, and you make those corrections as you go along.
Do you believe, Heather, when it comes to the policy making, we believe that any particular X organization, they must be having some sort of an policy which talks about including transgender people and including gender, female gender or whatever. So some sort of a reservation for them or some sort of an entry level at where they can at least hop in into the jobs. So do you think caste has an important role? Is there a mention of the caste in these policies?
I've only seen them in the motherhood statements that we believe that we will hire everyone, people irrespective of caste, gender, religion, sexual orientation, identity. But honestly, I haven't seen people going beyond disability or gender to that extent. Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. We don't talk about caste at workplace. There's some sort of a, I think a fear associated with, let's not talk about religion, let's not talk about caste. Yeah, and I think that's the dialogue that we need to initiate, because I was very much amazed when Black Lives Matter happened in the West and everyone went on by saying, yeah, let's talk about it. But at the same time, during the pandemic, when migrants and what was going on with them was going on, nobody at workplace was really talking about it. While we would talk about, yeah, okay, media, news, but what does it mean that, how is that section going to come into the workplace? What are some of the entry barriers that exist today? How can we look at lowering those entry barriers in a way to kind of allow those groups to also come in? So I do feel that there are times when we are very smartly handling the words which we are using in our policy versus what it gets really played out into action.